Okay, so we'll see component scan. What are the best practices? The components are scanned at the startup. So whenever you specify this component annotation at the Java class level, where you want to turn them as a bean, okay, the component scan annotation, which actually the specific one. Let me show you that.
Manju, I want to stay with that question.
Go ahead.
I mean, the question on bean and component, right? In terms of the usability in here, the bean or component doesn't have any difference, right? In terms of the usability.
No, there is a difference.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
okay. So let me give you. Can I actually hold this question for some more time? Towards
sure,
the end
no
of
problem.
this session, I'm going to address some of the annotations, like
sure,
annotation.
No problem. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. If this question doesn't answer, please bring back to the slide again.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Okay. So the component scan, like when the system starts up or when the application context is getting created, then based on the base package what you have given, it is going to scan that base package. In that base package, all the classes will go and scan one by one, and if any classes has an annotation called @component, it's going to pick up that and turn that as a bean. It'll first extract all the bean definition and turn that as a bean while part of creating a context. And the moment we start scanning the base package, you can expect some delay in startup time, because it has to based on how you define the base package, the startup time will be slower. Okay, if you narrow down the base package to a specific for your application classes, then it will become a little faster. If you become too widen, like if you say like com dot company name dot some project name like this, if you keep it at the high level, because it has to go and scan all the sub packages under that package and get all the classes, so it's going to take more time. So one thing you need to make a best practice to go and put it into a very narrow down packages. Okay, so that is one thing, and especially when you put the larger application, you need to be really careful, because if you make it widen, it will become extremely slow in the worst case. Okay, then what are the best practices to do a scanning? Okay, if you do a scan like this at component scan with the base packages like org comma com, then it has to go under all the in the class path, all the org jar files, which will go and scan, and com files, it will go and scan all the packages. This is going to be extremely slow, and it is going to be bad performance. Okay, and it is still bad, and this is okay if you are becoming a a little more less wider, and it's always good to go with a very optimized one. So let's say in my application, repository classes, service classes, and control classes, only the component scan will go and take this package name and scan under this, all the classes which belongs to this package will be get scanned, so that scanning scope will be very optimized here. So this will be a very good performance. This will be very really bad performance. Okay, so while you are doing a component scan, you will have to take care of this. Okay, so that's component scan. Now you can look at that. I have two different options to do a dependency injection. One is annotation based configuration, another one is Java based configuration. So now the question is when to use what. Okay, the first we learned the Java configuration, so which is fair enough. Now we introduce again annotation, and what are the pros and cons of these two different dependency injection approaches. Okay, now if you look at in case of Java, okay, all this bean creation is all the configuration instructions are there in one centralized place. Those are in Java configuration, Java classes, right? So you'll be writing this Java class is not a business class. It is just a configuration class. Okay, so still you write this in a Java code, and while writing this Java instructions, Java configuration classes, IDE itself will validate many of the typecast checkings, all those things. Okay, this is a type checking will be enforced by the IDE itself. Okay, so it will make sure that all the right dependency is being injected at the right place. That's one advantage. But also can be used for all the classes and not only for your own classes. For example, if you compare with the annotations you can add it for only your own Java classes. You cannot go and add annotations to third-party classes. For example, if you are wanted to add some annotation in the external jars which you are including, okay, you cannot go and edit the classes. It is already there in the jar file. For those kind of things, you cannot go and add the annotations. Whereas in Java configuration, it is possible to go and create an external objects as well as a Spring Bean. Okay, so it is one disadvantage is a little more verbose than the annotations. Everything need to be created in one single place. Like one, you need to go and write the Java class, and another thing is you need to come back and write in the Spring Bean definitions or configuration instruction in the Java class as well. Okay, that's one disadvantage. So looking at the annotations, it's Java class, your business class, and also configurations are there in one single place. Like in the class itself, you're going to indicate that I want to create this as a bean. So you don't need to go to another Java configuration class to go and add this bean separately, write a separate method. So you don't need to do that. So that's one advantage. Okay, and sometimes what happens when you're doing a development, you go and create a Java class, business Java class, and if you forgot to add it in a Java configuration, and you will have to go and again, like when it throws an exception or when the functionality is not working as you are expected, then you need to go and you realize that you are not added into Java configuration, and you need to go and add it again and test it. Okay, so that would take away some time. So in this case, both Java class and also the bean definitions creation annotations can be added in a single place. So that allows you to very rapid development. So that's another advantage if you use the annotations driven approach. But there are some disadvantages with the annotations based configuration. One thing is it works with only for your own code. Okay, you cannot go and add it to third-party Java classes as we discussed. That's one thing. And another thing is the configuration spread across all your code base. Everywhere you will see the component and AutoWare, and you don't know if you want to go and figure out and maintain the code. It is a little harder to maintain than the Java configuration approach, because Java configuration approach, I know what is the object gets created, what is the dependencies I'm injecting. But in this case, AutoWire, and you don't know which class is going to pick up, you will have to really understand and do a little more. It's a little tough to do debugging also sometimes if you don't understand certain things. So that's a little harder. And if you look at the basic principle, what we are trying to use here is the separation of concerns. So two different concerns. One is like business logic and configuration logics are combined in the same code. So merges this configuration and code together, and which leads to a bad separation of concern. That's another disadvantage with the annotation. So having this, having the pros and cons, so you can choose which one to go for it. I can actually choose to go for purely like Java, or purely annotation, or a mix and match of Java configuration and annotation. I can choose to do it. Okay, it all depends on how you can use. So the mix and match is always supported by Spring. Okay. So if let's say like we discussed about the component scan. If I add the art component, okay, each and every class has to be scanned. So now if I decide, so all the object creation, I will do it through Java configuration, For all the dependency injection, I will do using an auto-wire. You can do mix and match like this. It is still possible. Okay. Especially like some of the Spring projects heavily uses this annotation based approach. Okay, like Spring MVC beans completely depends on the using an MVC. Okay, because you cannot go and create everything. It will go to simplify a lot of things. So it makes much more efficient than the Java configuration. So uses the annotations for Spring MVC beans. So beans that are not referenced elsewhere, so it will get created. Okay, and uses a Java configuration for service layer and repository layer beans, where you can go and create all those beans in the Java configuration. And uses annotation when possible, but it still uses a Java configuration for the legacy code that cannot be changed, because you cannot go and add the annotations in the third party. So this way you can actually choose to do a mix and match. Some component where you can choose purely on the annotation. For like service and repository layer, you can go and choose to go for the Java configuration. Okay.
Manju, one question. So when you say Java config in this context, right? So you're referring to the @ configuration.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
So component is an example of annotation, right?
Component is an annotation.
Right? Okay. So because I'm assuming @ configuration is also an annotation, so that is where the confusion is. Now, the question is, you mentioned like third-party classes, we will not be able to use annotations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, just assume I'm using a third-party library, say a JSON writer or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just including the jar file into my project. And what I want to do is I'm going to create an instance of that JSON writer in my project. So what I'm doing basically is I'm just defining an instance variable called JSON writer, and then I'm making it as @autowired, right?
Mm-hmm.
So @autowired qualifies to be an annotation, right?
Right.
So in that case, I'm actually using a JSON writer class, which is a third-party library, into my class
Mm-hmm.
using @autowire.
Good.
So in that case, how does it actually translate to?
Good question. Okay. So if you look at, come back to the slide. Okay. So what I said is, let's say that class, whatever you are referring to a JSON library class. Okay. If let's say that's a JSON a converter implementation, something like this, right? So if I have that class, do you have that class Java file source code, or do you have the .class file?
I'll just have the .class file inside the jar. That's it.
That's right? Good. So now, if I go and define the variable and do autowire for that, that is fine. But where does it actually referring to? Where are you going to create the bean for it? See, when you do autowire, that means this autowire is trying to look at, is that class type has the bean is already created in the container or not. If it is there, it will take it and inject it. But in the first place, somebody has to create that bean. How are you going to create that bean to do autowire? Did you got my question?
Okay. So in that case, yeah. So that case, what happens is @bean is not possible, or rather, yeah, it's possible. Rather,
It is possible.
But it is possible. But even @autowired is possible, right?
Let's understand first. I'm talking only an Spring Bean creation through two different approaches. I'm talking about the Spring Bean creation dependency injection. See, Java configuration and annotation. I can create the Spring Bean using two different approaches. Okay, for a moment you keep the dependency injection moment out. Okay, I'm just purely talking about the bean creation.
Yeah, I
Okay,
got it. Okay, fine. Yeah, bean creation is fine. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you understand this concept, then somebody has to create the bean using a Java configuration. Then only you can do auto-wire. Otherwise, you cannot auto-wire.
So that point was specifically about the creation of the bean, not using the bean, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So the focus is here is a component and the bean. So
Yeah,
component is gets
got it.
created using annotation, and the bean is gets used in the Java configuration. That's the point.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's say in the legacy way, let's say I consider I don't have a Spring yet. When I want to create my object, at the same time I wanted to connect to database and load something from the database and keep it in my instance variables. For example, I want to cache something, or I want to do some initialization part of an object creation. Normally, how do you do it in your legacy way of creating a Java class? What is the practice you have been following? If I want to initialize something, I need to create a data source and get it from the database, or I want to allocate something, some sort of initialization I want to do. Where do you do that initialization part?
So if it is a stateful object, we do it in the constructor.
Okay.
Or if we have to maintain the state for the class, we can do it inside a static block or any kind of static initialization.
Okay, got it. So let's say it's stateful, and normally you go and write this initialization method, and you call that initialization method from the constructor, right? Let's
Yes.
say, let's say I want to do similar things using a Spring, and I have one constructor dependency to be injected, and I have a setter dependency to be injected. Okay, in the initialization method, I also use an instance variable what I have been injecting through setter method as well. Okay. Now the question is, can I call initialization method from the constructor?
The initialization variable is set only in the setter, is it?
One of the variable which I am injecting through setter, which is injected through setter method, which I am using in the initialization method. Now, if I call this initialization method from the constructor, is it going to work?
It's too early actually.
It's too early. So you may get null pointer exception if you are using it, right? So that's one thing. So now I'm clear. If I have any setter methods which has a dependencies used in the initialization block, I cannot use it. I cannot call that init method from the constructor anymore, right? Okay. So now I have, let's say I have three setters. Okay, all three setter dependency injections variables being used in the initialization method. Okay, now can I call this any of the setter method the initialization block?
I mean,
If
you can call, but what happens is you are overriding the Spring's behavior.
right, if you look at if I have a three dependencies, okay, and I really don't know which one is going to call first and which one is going to call at the last, right? And now
Yeah.
I don't know where to call this initialization method from. Okay. Now I don't know, because I don't know when the object creation with a fully dependency injections have been done completely. And I want to call my initialization block, my method, only after object is fully created and fully dependency injections are completely done. And now I don't have any control, because when the Spring is going to create or call these setter methods in which order, I don't know. So I have a problem in calling an initialization method. So what do I do with it? Okay, so what Spring has provided is, since you don't have a control in this case, you can actually go and register your init method where you want to do some initialization. The way you can do is, you can go and ask Spring, look, I want to call this method only after you're completely done with all the dependency injection, and call me, invoke me my method after completing this. I can go and instruct to Spring during the configuration itself. Okay, that is being done using this post construct annotation. Okay, the post construct is used for invoking this method, which is the initialization method. So what it does is, Spring, when object gets created and all the dependencies are injected fully, and when the object is ready to before ready to use it, then it will go and call this, and this method get initialized. All the things what you want to load, it will load it. So that is being done using this post construct annotation. Okay, and similarly, before even doing a garbage collection of this, before even releasing a reference from the container, and you wanted to clean up something which you allocated in the initialization block. If you wanted to clean up, then I'll go and write the cleanup method, clear cache, and I attach this another annotation called pre-destroy. Okay, so this is during the constructor initialization block. This is at the destroy block. Okay, so these two annotations are provided during the startup and a shutdown case. And visibility of this method should not take any parameter, and it should be public. Okay, return void. As I said that all the annotations are by default, it's a passive. You need somewhere, you need to go and make them active. In order to make them active, I need to go and add this component scan to go and scan these annotations. Okay, so component scan will actually go and scan these annotations also, part of it, other than like the component annotation. This will also go and scan this post construct and pre-destroy. And this post construct and pre-destroy are the standard annotations, which is coming from JSR 250 annotations. Even that this post construct and pre-destroy is also used by EJB3 also. Okay, so this is a standard annotation. This is coming from the JSR 250. But component scan will go and scan this and invoke this. And if you are already using
Manju, question here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the JDBC account repository, so component scan, right? If in this case JDBC account repository is not of the type component, right?
If you are not done this as a component,
it will then scan, even then it will scan these two methods, is it?
Yes, because I have added these annotations, which is a post construct and pre-destroy. To scan this,
Okay.
I still go and use this. If you are using a component at the class level, automatically anyway you would have added this, that this too will be already scanned by this. So that means this components can be used for the multiple purpose.
So in this case, a normal Java class is being managed by the Spring container without creating it as a bean, is it?
Can you repeat the question?
So, so if Spring container has to call the post construct and pre-destroy, right? The object should be managed by the container.
Correct. Correct.
In this case, we have a class which is not annotated as component.
Correct. I may be creating this JDBC account repository part of the Java configuration itself.
Okay.
That part I am not shown here. See, you can choose to create the bean using one of the option. Either you can go for
So
a
that
JDBC.
is compulsory.
Yeah, that is.
That's compulsory.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the Spring world, whatever I have been talking, okay, that is applied for only for Spring Beans.
Okay.
Okay. Most of the cases. I'm just requalifying my statement, saying putting a disclaimer. Most of the things what we are going to discuss is about the Spring Beans only. Most of the
Okay.
cases. Okay, so in this case, if you look at, I have this JDBC account repository, and either I would be creating this using a Java configuration, or I'll go and put annotation here saying that that component, whatever the case. Irrespective of that, how I create an Spring Bean, this populate cache method will be called here. If you look at constructor dependency injection will be called, and setter dependency injection. And after this, all the setter dependency injections are called, then it will invoke this post construct method by the Spring itself. So you don't need to worry, Spring will actually call this method to get initialized. Okay, so this is the post construct. And similarly for the pre-destroy, when you are closing, about to close this context, close, then all the Spring Beans which has having this annotation pre-destroy, and that method will be get invoked before releasing from the container. Okay, before the object get releases from the container, it will go and call this cleanup and releases it. So that's a graceful exit. And one thing is, for singleton, by default as a singleton beans, this pre-destroy method will be called, because this object is there in the container. Okay, for the prototype beans, pre-destroy method will not be called by a Spring. You will have to make sure that you will be calling this method before you go out of the scope, because Spring doesn't have the reference for the prototype beans. Spring container will not have only the creation part will be done by container, but it doesn't have any reference inside for all the prototype beans. Yes, so that's okay. So now, have you guys used?
Manju, that point is correct. So if I don't have a reference to the prototype bean, if the prototype bean internally is going to have auto wiring of other beans or whatever, right? So Spring, without having the reference to the parent object, will it still control the auto wiring of objects inside the prototype bean?
Yes. See, all bean creation part is common for all the beans, whether it is singleton or prototype. Like the cycle will be same. Okay. Only thing is, for the singleton bean, it will keep the reference in the container. For the prototype bean, it will not keep the reference in the container. Even though a prototype bean is having a reference to, it could have a reference to another prototype bean, or it could have a reference to a singleton bean. Anyway, that part will not be get cleaned up for you anyways, because Spring will take care of it. Only thing is, when you define a prototype bean, you need to make sure that what you have allocated in the initialization block, which is a post construct block, you'll have to make sure that you call the pre-destroy method yourself. So pre-destroy method will
now
not.
within a method. Okay, so within a method, if I'm going to say context.getBean and take a bean, and I just complete some set of activities and complete the method, that reference object, right? Will it be automatically garbage collected, or there's a problem? There's a possibility of a memory leak there.
Okay, so if I understand your question properly, in the prototype bean, and you go and do a lookup of some bean inside some method, right?
Yeah.
And you get some object. Okay, what are those objects? Is it a singleton bean or it's a prototype? If it is a singleton,
prototype.
If it is a prototype, okay, you need to make sure that the destroy method you will be calling before you move out from that method.
Okay, assuming I understand with destroy, but assuming the destroy method is not required, or I don't have a stateful object which has to be cleansed out, will the automatic garbage collection, that is, it becomes a stack level variable, the Java fundamental. So will it be garbage collected on that basis?
See,
Yes.
because Spring is also a kind of objects, right? If you look at from framework point of view, as long as it is a behavior of the JVM, if it is getting eligible for doing a garbage collection, yes, JVM will take care of it.
That is one of the reason why a Spring container is not maintaining the reference to that object, right? So one example is within a method, if I'm going to take context.getBean and if I still maintain that object inside the container, Spring would never know that the method has completed or whatever.
No, because
I'm just thinking the rationale behind why the Spring is not maintaining the object.
Okay, the reason behind why prototype object reference is not there part of the container is, and I really don't know the use case of a prototype beans, how you're using it. Okay, moment I say I declare as a prototype, you may be using maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 10 times, maybe 100 times, or thousands of times. I don't know how many times you're going to do a lookup of that object. Okay, and if I'm keeping a reference, okay, unnecessarily I'll be keeping a reference for all the object which is going to be useless if you're not using it, because I don't know the scenario in which.
Understood.
That's the reason a Spring will not maintain the reference of the prototype bits.
Okay, got it. So one of the example I can see is if we are creating few types of connections like the HTTP URL or URL based connections, right? So it is not like a database connection. So
Correct.
you establish a connection and then you keep closing it immediately. So
Right.
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Yep.
So if I have instance of singleton B, so can I make it as null?
Can you make that object as a null?
Yes, I'm assigning it to null value. So will it get garbage collected?
First of all, singleton bean, the object reference is there in the container, and when you do a lookup, you will only get the reference to the object. You will not
Right.
get the actual thing. So I don't think you can do a null for the reference object.
Okay.
Okay, so because parent has the main thing.
Okay.
And okay, so question to you: is it possible to do it in the JVM, normal Java code without Spring? If you get a reference, if you go
Yes, we can assign null.
and the parent, the object which is created by the parent function will get null.
I didn't get you.
No, it will not.
In the normal JVM, let's keep the Spring aside. Okay.
Okay.
And one method you're calling and creating an object, and you're keeping a reference, and you're passing only a reference to.
No, inside method it is not possible.
Correct. It's the same behavior. Whatever
Right.
it is possible in the Java, it is the same behavior is applied in the Spring as well.
Got it.
Okay. Okay.
So Manju, for the prototype beans, the pre-destroyer method will never ever be called.
Correct. It will never be called.
So it's only the JVM will be taking care if that reference is not there.
Correct. You will have to call this destroy method yourself if you have done some allocations. Okay. If you are not doing any cleanup, sometimes it will lead to a memory leak also. Anyway, object will be garbage collected anyways. But inside the object, if you are holding any file descriptors, you will have to make sure that you clean up. Otherwise, you will the file descriptor in the system may not be appropriate.
Okay. Yeah. And Manju, if we are defining the pre-destroy and post construct, then will this that add component scan will be required?
Yes.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yes.
Okay.
What components can be required?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. So have you guys used UML diagrams, UML tools to define your class diagram? When you are designing a UML diagrams, when you say this is a class I'm going to define in a UML, uh, it will actually insist you to specify what kind of class it is, where it is belongs to in a three-tier architecture, whether it is belongs to a repository layer or service layer or a web layer kind of things. Okay, that kind of information is there in you can provide from the UML tools, and these kind of details, what it is called in the UML is a stereotypes. So you can go and provide a stereotype metadata information for a specific class which you are defining in the UML. Okay, even the Spring uses the same concept to define a stereotype annotations. So if I'll go and define some annotations saying that this annotation, if I go and add it into a repository layer, that means I can add this at the repository layer. For all the repository beans, okay, I will go and add one common annotation saying that at repository. Okay, and similar at the service level, I'll go and add an annotation at the service level as a at service annotation. Even the web layer, I will go and add an annotation called at controller. So all these kind of stereotype annotations are being defined by Spring as well, using the same concept. Okay, so now the way I define this the new stereotype annotations in the Spring, which is already there. Okay, there is already a component annotation, so which will create a bean for you. So what Spring has done is to indicate the different stereotype annotation. It is came up with another annotation called as service annotation. So when I go and use this service annotation at all the service classes, like transfer service, reward network services, anything, if I go and use this annotation at the class level to create the bean, whether you use this service annotation or component annotation, both are equal in case of creating as a bean. Component scan will go and scan this service annotation, because the service annotation is having this component annotation, and hence this class is eligible to create the Spring bean. The Spring bean will get created using this component scan. Okay, is it clear? Okay, so these are the annotations are called as a stereotype annotation. So what Spring has done is, by using this which is annotation, component annotation, it has defined several other stereotype annotation at the different levels and different purposes. Okay, if you look at that this at component annotation, when you use this at component annotation at any class, so that class will be turned as a Spring bean by using a component scan. So this we are clear and we have learned. Okay. Now Spring has defined several other stereotype annotations. Like for the service classes, I can go and use the service annotation. For the repository classes, like data access classes, I will go and use this at repository annotation. And at the web layer, I'll go and use at the controller annotation. Okay. For creating bean, whether you use this stereotype annotation or a component annotation, it is the same. There is no difference. Only thing is, I can identify by using this different service, different stereotype annotation. If you have used this annotation in an appropriate layer in an appropriate way, I can add additional behaviors later. But as long as the Spring bean creation concern, doesn't matter whether you use this component or a stereotype annotations. Okay. So there is one more annotation which is like, there are several annotations created by this component, which is like stereotype annotation. So one more we have already exposed about the configuration annotation. So configuration annotation is also derived from the component. Okay, this is called used for only for the Java configuration, which we saw. Okay, so what happens behind the scene? Okay, when an application context is getting created, okay, first it will look at, is this annotation is there at the class level? If yes, then each and every method it is going to scan all the @bean annotations. Okay, and instead of turning this Java configuration as a bean itself, moment I have this bean annotation at the method level, it will take that as a beans to create everything. So the whole code flow for this configuration annotation will be different by using this Java configuration. So that is a differentiation factor for creating a Java configuration. Okay. Is this clear?
Manju, actually, can I request you to explain this part again? So one question which I have is, I mean, @component can replaceably be used with the other stuffs here?
Yes. So if you look at, okay, as I said, stereotype annotations are created because I wanted to identify different tiers. If you look at, I have the repository layer, service layer, and web layer. Okay. So what Spring has done is it created the stereotype annotations using the component annotation. So when you use the component everywhere, okay, and these components will anyway pick up and create a turn it as a pin. That we understood. Okay. Now, instead of using the component annotation at all over the place, what we have done is we have created this new stereotype annotation like service, repository, controller, things like this. There are many other things. Okay, let's understand this first. So now instead of going and putting our component annotation everywhere, so based on the layer, if I'm writing a service classes, I will go and add this. If I'm writing a repository classes, I will go and add this. If I'm writing a web layer classes, I will go and add this in case of Spring MVC. When I add this, as long as for the bean creation, okay, goes through fine whether you use this or this, doesn't matter. Only thing is I can identify based on this annotation which layer it is belongs to this class. That identification I'll be able to figure out from this. And when we discuss about Spring MVC or something else, and also we can actually take an advantage of this specific annotation at the specific layer. We'll discuss that later. Okay, is this part is clear?
So when you mention take advantage, so my question is, putting it as @repository, is it going to give me an additional, say for example, I have the JDBC repository, whatever, right? So in those classes, when I extend those classes, I make them as @repository. So just by putting in @repository, is the class going to derive any additional advantage or a feature compared to putting it as @component?
Okay. Right now, okay, I'm just talking about only a Spring Bean creation. With respect to that, okay, let's say I don't have any other advantage. Only I'm talking about only Spring Bean context. Okay. When I come to a additional feature, when I'm going to talk throughout this course, we can figure out.
Okay. In that case, okay, let me stay with only the creation part.
Yeah.
So @component and @configuration, right? You mentioned @configuration would be scanned first, and then the beans inside the configuration classes, right?
Yeah, I'll come back to this configuration. Okay, yeah. Just keep this configuration alone because that is a special thing. Have you understood this part?
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yeah.
Is it clear? Okay. Okay. So the Java configuration feature has been created after the stereotype annotations have been implemented. Okay, so what they've done is, okay, in order to make the Java configuration functionality to enable, they've created this another stereotype annotation, which is a configuration. Okay, when I go and add this configuration annotation to the Java class, okay, and that is a point where I can recognize that as a Java configuration is, and I can put the total different logic to scan the method and see whether I have a @bean annotation for each and every method, and if I have any one of the method has a bean annotation, then I will treat that Java this configuration annotation class in a different way. That's a distinguishing factor here. Is that
yeah, so if I have @component instead of @configuration, I don't have that advantage. So I'll not be able to create bean inside the @component.
That's right. Only you can do @bean annotation inside the configuration annotation. You cannot do it at the @component level. That is a specific thing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
There are several stereotype annotations being used, which are there in the different applications or different projects. Like there are web services have different things. Spring integration will have different things, kind of stuff. Okay, there is one more annotation is which is like meta annotation. Meta annotation is your own annotation. You can go and define your own annotation based on what Spring has provided. So let's say one of the class I want to go and define service annotation to create a bean at the service class level, or also I want to add the transactional behavior for it. So in that case, what I can do is I can go and define my own annotation, which is like annotation my transactional service. I'll go and create this annotation, my annotation. For this annotation, I will go and add this service and also transactional annotation. So instead of going and adding two annotations everywhere, if I'm using this in multiple places, instead of going and adding these two everywhere, I can just go and add this my transactional service annotation in only one. Okay, whatever it is given to this, it will be taken to all the classes wherever I'm going to use it. So that's called as a meta annotations. Okay, so one thing is, if you look at this, when you do a component scan, since it has a service annotation has a component @component annotation, so it is going to pick up for doing a scan and create it as a Spring bean. Okay, that is one thing. And all these annotations, okay, I wanted all these annotations to be there in the .class file as well. Okay, so in order to keep all these annotation metadata information in the .class, okay, I need to go and instruct to this specific annotation saying that retain all these annotation even in the runtime also. Okay, for that to happen, I need to go and add this annotation called retention with a retention policy as a runtime. Okay, if you don't provide this configuration, all the annotation details will not be there in the runtime when you load the classes in the memory. So if you want to access those annotation in the runtime, you need to go and add this runtime, which is a retention policy as a runtime. Okay, and the target element where you can use this my transactional annotation, you can say element type, whether you want to add at the class level or the method level or at the field level. So I am saying at the type, that means at the class level. You can use only this annotation at the class level, not at the method or not at the field level. Okay, so by using this, you can go and define your own meta annotation. So that's about Spring annotations. Any questions so far?